All right, what is good, YouTube? Welcome back into episode 30 of Catch and Counter. I am Jack, and as always, I got my guy Nibs with me. So, Nibs, everyone's favorite podcast, is back at it. How are we feeling ahead of episode number 30?
Man, we feeling great, baby. We got some shit to talk about though, Jack. We I'm not feeling too good because our friend of the show is dealing with some bullshit. We'll get into it. You know, I w- okay.
Like you said, we will most definitely get into that. But first of all, I want to get into a fight that we had, not this past weekend, but the weekend before. Me and Dakota were on the day after, so we kind of talked a bit about it. But our guy, Tank Davis, somebody who we've had on our pound for pound list for a while recently. Some people like it, some people don't like it, but he put together a great performance. What I think was maybe the best performance of his career against Frank Martin last weekend, picked up a big knockout. So, what were your thoughts on Tank and how we looked against Frank Martin last weekend?
First off, before I get into Tank, what's up, Bourbon and Boxing? um, I want to give a shout out to Frank Martin because I think Frank Martin deserves credit for what he was doing early on in the fight. I think he's a great fighter, and I think Tank is right. He did an interview before the fight. Frank Martin's going to be a world champion. It just wasn't his night that weekend. But I'm gonna tell you something, man. And we say this; it gets said way too much. It gets thrown around way too much nowadays. Tank is different. Tank is built different, bro, and he's got the perfect nickname. Frank Martin was getting some shit off. Let's be real clear. And Frank Martin isn't a light touch. So, let's be real understanding what we're talking about here. We saw his face. Tank took his to give his, right? He walked right through that shit. So he's got the perfect combination of boxing skills, speed, world changing power, and a chin. Because let's be real clear, he's taking some shots that probably would have stumbled most folks, if not put them on their ass. He's been able to walk through that and deliver his own. Everybody has a game plan, right? Until you get punched in the face. Famous words of Mike Tyson. So everybody says, "Oh, well, this is how you beat Tank." Then you get in the ring with him and you feel that power, and you go, "Fuck." You know what I'm saying? And I think that's what happened with Frank Martin, bro. He had a game plan. He was executing that game plan early on. He was, I mean, I had him winning the first 4 rounds, easy. And then, but it was I wasn't afraid. I said, well, Tank's gonna end up doing what he does, and he did. He came back, and I didn't have him losing around after that. And the scary part is, right? Who do you see Tank having a chance against Tank after watching him do what he did to Frank Martin after 14 months off, bro? Again, that's another big part of this. Let's not lose sight of the fact that this dude was off for over a year. He had no boxing. And I know people say, well, he was only in prison for 90 days. Do 1 day in prison and tell me it was only 90 days. you know, he went to jail for 90 days. That's 90 of those 14 months, 90 days of that 14 months was spent in jail. He comes back and puts on a show like that. Get out of here, bro. He's different. He's special. Um, he's one of those guys that's gonna should be a first ballot Hall of Famer when he hangs this shit up. I don't see anybody in his weight class, including Shakur, that can really do anything with him. And after seeing and I know we're gonna get to this, what happened with Haney and Ryan, Haney definitely ain't got the chin to fuck around with Tank, because Ryan Garcia hit hard. Tank punches holes through people.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. And Jesus, shout out to you, but I'm not sure if Raymond Morataya or Matias would beat Tank. I think I'd have my money on Tank in both those fights. But yeah, the one thing that I noticed about Tank, and I think that the two fights I want to see for him at lightweight would be Shakur and Loma. I think I favor Tank against both those guys, but I'd want to see how he deals with each of them. With Shakur, especially the master in the distance and with the jab, and also Loma with the angles. But I think Tank would be able to figure those both out. But those are things that I need to see. To be honest, it's easy for me to say, yeah, I think Tank beats those dudes, and I think he does. But we got to see it actually happen in person also. But the one thing that I like about Tank is You've seen it in this fight especially too, is that each round when he's in there, because you notice how big the ring looked in the first couple rounds, but each round, the rounds go by, the ring seems smaller and smaller when you're fighting a guy like Tank Davis. Notice how much room Frank Martin had the first couple rounds. Notice by round four going on, he spent more time on the ropes. It was harder for him to move around. It seemed like every time he tried to disengage and circle out, Tank was able to cut the ring off on him. So I think that's what Tank doesn't get enough credit for sometimes is his boxing ability to set up his shots because I think he is heavy-handed, but it's the speed and the accuracy that also make him that heavy-handed. But it's also the dude's fight IQ, being able to cut the ring off and being able to systematically, because I think that's what he did. He systematically broke Frank Martin down. I think just he physically drains his opponents as much as he mentally drains them. And I think that's exactly what we've seen last Saturday.
You know what it reminds me of is his fight with Santa Cruz. Santa Cruz is a great boxer, right? He's talented. He was coming up so in weight, so his punches didn't have the same effect as a Frank Martin. Frank Martin is he. I mean, if you look at him, he looks bigger than Tank, right? But similarly, Santa Cruz was having some success. He marked up Tank's face a little bit. He was boxing, he was moving, and then Tank caught him with the same punch. It's that uppercut you don't see it. It's a left-handed sneaky uppercut. Now Santa Cruz is and again against the ropes, right? Trying to cover up. He's got that the earmuffs on. Frank again against the ropes, trying to be slick. That uppercut catches you. Everybody, goes wow with the straight right hand because that's the one that put him out. But it wasn't. The uppercut is what put him out. The uppercut set him up, and then boom, his lights were already off. You know what I mean? Tank was just closing the curtain with the straight hand that put him on the canvas. So that uppercut is vicious. He lands it. It's a thing of beauty because he lands it cleanly in every fight. You know what I'm saying? And I think the only person that he did knock down with it was Pitbull. That dude's built differently as well. I don't know what's in his chin, but Jesus. But you look at that and you have to look at what Tank his abilities are, and then give Frank Martin kind of a pass because this is what Tank does. You know what I mean? He's going to get you're going to have some success, but then he's going to figure everything out, and then he's going to destroy. It's kind of like Mayweather with punching power. Like, get out of here, bro. You can't beat that combination. And I think again, and they finally brought it up in that broadcast, is that people underestimate his boxing IQ. They underestimate the actual boxing skills Tank has because he talks shit and because he's got astronomical power. People just focus on the power. It's like, yeah, but he's setting that shit up beautifully. He is playing chess. Everybody else is fucking around with them checkerboards.
No, 100%. And I've got a few comments in here. We got Jesus saying that they'll never ever allow Tank, his prized possession, to be in a dangerous fight. So I want to ask you, Jesus, because we're going to pivot in a second to what we want next from Tank. It seems like we're going to get a Lomachenko fight next. Would you consider that an easy fight for Tank? Because I definitely wouldn't. So to me, I think that would be, even if he's the favorite in that fight, I think Lomachenko, even at his age, is not washed up by any means. He's the same age as Crawford, younger than Usyk, some of these other guys. So I think that he could definitely give Tank a good test. And Jeff from Bourbon and Boxing bringing up a good point. Just Leo Santa Cruz, Barrios, Garcia, Cruz, Martin. Another one I'll throw in there is Jose Pedraza when he was undefeated too. So I think Tank's got an underrated resume. Is it a pound for pound number one type resume? No, I think it's a lot of like B plus, A minus wins. But I don't think he gets enough credit for his resume sometimes. And even if he hasn't given us the fights we want, like the Loma fight, the Shakur fight, those other fights, I think we still got to put some respect on his name for not only the guys that he's beaten, but like you said, also how he's beaten these guys too.
Bro, I take issue with that. And the reason I take issue with that is Leo Santa Cruz, people weren't putting respect on his name. That's correct. This dude's a multi-division champion, right? He's only got one other loss before Tank, and that was a decision. I think it was like a split decision. We're talking about one of the greater fighters. Now I get it. He was underweighted. He's smaller than Tank. But then you look at the guys that he's beat that are now champions at higher weight classes. Pitbull Cruz, albeit a knockout against Rolly, right? But he made Rolly look like light work. He made it look easy. You know what I'm saying? And he's a champion at 140. Mario Barrios is a belt holder at 140 fucking 7. His wins have aged beautifully. look what Ryan Garcia did to Devin Haney. This dude was by a lot of people were considering Devin Haney pound for pound top 3. When he won all those belts. You know what I'm saying? Give this man his respect, bro. Like the whole he wasn't in trouble. Like you said. I mean, before Pedraza became a gatekeeper, which is what he is now, people thought it was way too early for Tank, and Tank annihilated him. It doesn't look dangerous because he's making it look easy. But fighting Pitbull Cruz on short notice, that's turned out to again age beautifully. Fighting Mario Barrios going up to 140 to do it to boot, aged beautifully. You know what I'm saying? Fighting Ryan Garcia might not be on Tank's level as far as skill is concerned, but we found out real quick that boy can hit hard as shit. So he's been in some trouble. It's just the trouble that other fighters are in against him is much more dangerous.
Yeah, I think with Ryan Garcia, we found out a few more things about him, which we'll talk about a little bit later on too. But so Tank versus Loma does seem like it's next. Do you like that fight? What do you kind of expect from that fight if we do see it in like October?
I like it for legacy. I don't necessarily need to see it for Tank because I think when I saw Loma against Kambosos, I was expecting him to get Kambosos out of there quicker. But he did dominate Kambosos. You know what I mean? He did what we expected him to do. But he also got touched a lot by Kambosos. That's another thing people didn't really kind of pay too much attention to. If you looked at Loma's face after that fight, he got touched up pretty nice. Well, let's be real clear. Kambosos just doesn't have power enough to put him in any danger. He was touched up even against Devin. Again, Devin doesn't have any power to put him in any danger. He gets touched up like that against Tank, lights out. And I think that Loma's in a space now, and I'm not giving excuses, but I think he's lost a step or two, and Tank is gaining. You know what I mean? Tank hasn't fallen off; he's ascending. So, on a purely boxing standpoint, I don't need to see it, but I'd love to see it for legacy of Tank. To me, the fight that I want to see is him and Shakur, because him and Shakur been flapping his gums forever. Talking about he can beat Tank. He's got the special sauce. He's got the secret ingredients or whatever. We'll see. But I want to see that, and I would love to see him move up. And everybody's talking about him and Teofimo. I'd love to see. I think to me that would be blockbuster. Get all the stars and everybody out their seats. But immediately next year, I'm good with him.
Yeah, but even I really like that fight a lot too. Because even with Loma, like you said, he's lost a step or two, and for me, I think it might even be he's lost like maybe a half step. I don't think he's lost too much because he's only a fight removed from a lot of people thinking he should have been the undisputed champion of the world. So right now he should be, in a lot of people's opinion, the undisputed champion defending against Tank Davis, and Tank should be fighting for all those belts. So I just think that Loma, since he's moved to 35, he's been fighting bigger guys, so he looks a little different. But I don't think he's any different really now from the version of that he was that we saw fight Linares and Luke Campbell and those guys too. So I just think that Tank should get a lot of credit if he does get the job done. I think he will. I think it's be really tricky for him to figure out those angles, but I think once he times it down, if he can catch Loma in some of those pivots or when he's moving side to side, I think that is probably his best bet. But like I said, a lot easier said than done, and I'd love to see that. And then as they're saying here, I'd love to see the Shakur fight after that. Absolutely, I think that could be the biggest fight in boxing right now for sure.
And when I say he's lost a step, let me be real clear. We're talking about it's like Devin Hester losing a step and still running a 4.340. You know what I'm saying? Like, okay,
It's still a fast motherfucker. Yeah.
yeah, he's still the best returner of all time. So, Loma is, or Dion losing the step. He's still Dion, Loma losing a step is still 95% better than everybody else. You know what I mean? So and I think Tank is in that 5% though. And that's what's scary about it. But you could also get the best version of Loma against Tank, right? Because he's going to show up in his best condition. He's going to be, I could see if this would be one of those things where if Loma gets an injury in training camp, they'll call it off because Loma wants
Hmm.
to be 1,000% for that fight, right? And I think the same thing for Tank. Tank is not going to be bullshitting. He's going to be 100% right for a Loma fight. All the distractions and bullshit he's accustomed and used to, you're gonna see that put to the side. So you're gonna get the best versions of both of them. So I do think that it'll be an exciting fight. It's not something when I say I don't need to see it, I'm saying that it's like, okay, if we get it, great. But what I need to see from me is him and Shakur. I need to see that. Shakur's been flapping his gums, talking a lot of stuff. He's saying that Tank's power isn't all that great. That's another thing too. Have you noticed all these guys who got stopped by Tank all say the same thing? He doesn't really hit that
Hmm.
hard. Really? It didn't look like that.
Yeah.
You know
Uh-huh.
what I mean? Because he put your ass out. He doesn't hit that hard, but he knocked me out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We
okay.
didn't
It's
feel
not
it, so that's probably why. So, but even Jesus, we loved having you in the chat, my guy. But I'm not sure either about he's saying like Loma doesn't have the fire in him no more. Saying that he doesn't love boxing. I actually think for Loma that we're gonna see a very motivated Loma in this fight. I think for him this is his last chance to kind of regain just being a champ. He's already a champion, but being his last run to try to be the undisputed champion. I think he came so close against Devin. That I think if he had looked flat against Kambosos and maybe won a closer decision, I could have seen that. But I think the guy who doesn't have fire in him anymore, I don't think he stops Kambosos the way he does late in the fight, and I don't think he'd be jumping into a tank fight like he is. I just think that he'll be ready to go, and I think to me, he's too professional to take a fight like that and not give it 100%. But that's just my opinion.
I agree. And I think if we get vintage Loma, this could be, it could be not only a fight of the year, but you could be talking about like a fight of the decade type fight. You know what I'm saying? It could be one of the greatest fights we've ever seen. So, you know, give me a hell of a fight, and everything I just said goes out the fucking window. And I will eat all that crow. You know, and so I I respect I respect Loma too much to say it isn't a fight worth making. It's just, in my opinion, I think the Shakira is more important to boxing right now or in the future. Loma is important for right now in legacy. Shakur for me is that the winner of that is the future of the sport of boxing. Um, and I'll be honest with you, I think Shakur needs that fight more than Loma does because Loma's still an exciting fighter, right? Like Loma could fight a couch potato, and we're going to tune in because he's Loma. Nobody really wants to watch Shakur fight unless the guy across the ring from him is a Tank or a bigger name, right? Like if Shakur and Loma were to fight, people would show up for Loma. They're not showing up really for Shakur because he's put out some stinkers the last couple of times out. So I think Shakur needs that more than Tank does. It, if anything, Tank and Loma is going to be exciting. It's big time. It's a box office move.
For sure, and hey, hopefully we get Tank and Loma, and then we get Tank and Shakur right after that. That would be pretty nice. I saw one person say that, and this would be a perfect roadmap too. If you have Tank fight Shakur, Tank fight Loma first. You have Shakur fight Berinchik, who just got the WBO belt from Navarrete, and then you could make the two winners, which would most likely be Tank and Shakur, for undisputed after that. We don't live in a perfect world, but if we lived in a perfect world, that would be next. But moving on, so as we talked about earlier, you said we learned some things about Ryan Garcia. Now, we did learn some things from him April 20th, but we also learned a few other things about him after the fact that took place the day before the fight and also the day of the fight. So he has now officially been suspended for a year. His legal team settled with the athletic commission on it, so it wasn't a ruling that they gave him. They kind of settled over that ruling once his 4 month penalty was denied by the commission. So he's suspended for a year. His win is now turned into a no contest. Do you have any thoughts on just how this whole thing has, I guess, played out? And do you think it's good for the sport, bad for the sport? What do you think?
All right. So I think this is a lose lose for both fighters and us as fans. And the reason I say that is, I mean, the obvious is we can't unsee what we saw, right? We saw Devin Haney get his ass whipped. So for fans of Devin Haney, you can't unsee that. Your man took a L, you know, weight be damned, in this very minuscule amount of whatever this thing was in Ryan Garcia's system that showed up. And let's be really clear, not all cheating is the same. There's failing a test, and then there's failing a fucking test. You know what I'm saying? This again, it gives me Canelo tainted meat vibes, right? You know, the amount of the shit that was in his system was so minuscule, it doesn't really, give him an advantage or not. But cheating is cheating at the end of the day. Whether you're cheating by a lot or cheating by a little, cheating is cheating. I've always said that. I do. I'll take Ryan Garcia at his word, saying that that hey, this was in my supplements or I didn't know, etc. We move on because of the amount. Now we do know that there are a lot of guys who were cheating and they're trying to clean their system out, and maybe that small amount was in there because his cycle wasn't all the way through. Who knows, right? Cheating is cheating. You got caught. You're facing your suspension. Now he gave up his purse. He gives up the biggest win of his career, essentially. You know what I'm saying? And now he's got an asterisk next to his name. Like it or not, whether you're a fan of his, not a fan of his, or you're on his team, you've got an asterisk there because you were caught cheating. Again, micro or big or small, you got caught. Uh, Devin Haney, again, there's not really a win for him because we're not going to forget what you and your team were saying before and after that fight. You and your dad flapping your gums. We're not going to forget how inept you were at avoiding the one punch you knew was coming. You know what I'm saying? And going down. You have proven that anybody with some decent power that can just walk you down can put you on your ass. Um, so to me, it's a lose lose. Then Ryan's got to be out for a year. Nobody really is going to be clamoring to watch Devin Haney fight again, unless they run it back immediately after Ryan, serves his suspension. That probably be the only fight of Devin Haney's I'm going to be interested in going forward, unless he fights Tank for some reason, which I think he'd be a fool to do at this point, considering what happened to him against Ryan Garcia. So, to me, I just think it's a lose-lose all the way around, which is sad because it took a hell of an event and turned it into shit.
I do agree with you. I like the way you put it as a lose-lose. But the funny thing for me is that the way this has kind of been received as a whole, where it seems like Devin and his team are getting more criticism than Ryan and his team are, when Devin's like, hey, listen, he's the one who popped, not me. So can you argue that they should have handled things a little bit differently? Yes, but I think that would any of us have pushed for a suspension and pushed for a result change? I think any of us would be naive to say that we wouldn't do that if an opponent against us tested positive, no matter the amount. So I can see definitely why they had done that, and it is crazy to see just the difference in opinions and just reactions on both sides of that. But the one thing I do want to say is that it is good to see boxing finally get something right. Now we're going to talk in a little bit about something that somebody who we are close with who was on the bad end of something where boxing fucked up once again, but it's good to see in this end where boxing got something right. There is a precedent for penalties like this. So Mir Khan did get 2 years, and Badu Jack got a loss overturned to a DQ win. So that we've seen guys get penalties like that. So maybe Ryan, a smart choice of his was to settle for the 1 year suspension, saying, okay, they might take me out for two or more than that, so let me just take the 1 year suspension if we can settle on that. So I am happy they at least did that. Who do I think this whole thing affects more? I think it's Devin Haney. I think there's no questions asked. Now, should it be that way? No. But I think, as you said, A lot of people are going to look at that fight and they're going to say, well, you lost anyways. We're never going to know how much the Austrian affected him. As Jeff was saying, was it microdosing? What did he load it up before and then there was just a little bit left in the test, but he had a ton of it in his camp? We're never going to know those kind of things. And it seems like most of Ryan Garcia's fans don't give a shit anyways. Like they don't care that the win got overturned. Ryan doesn't seem like he cares it got overturned. He's became such a celebrity now that he's grown that kind of fanatic fan base where they'll kind of take his side no matter what. We see it with all athletes, great athletes, with musicians, with actors. Anytime you get to a certain level of fame, you're always going to have those fanatics who take your side no matter what. Seems like that's exactly where Ryan is right now, where no matter what happens, no matter what the commissions or anyone rules, people are just going to take his side no matter what. And I think that that's due to his popularity and just the fact that people are huge fans of him. But for Devin, I just wondered. The thing that sucks about him is that I don't know if he's ever going to be the same from this, and I'm hoping to God that he does come back and become the same guy that he was when we saw dominate, reach his pro grade, beat Lomachenko, become the undisputed champion. But I'm just not sure if physically you take a lot of knockdowns like that in a fight that he showed the heart of a champion too to even get up from all those shots and keep going, but also the mental aspect of dealing with that and even the not the well, I guess the backlash he's received from this and also how this is all played out in the long run, where I'm sure he thought that Ryan testing positive would kind of vindicate him in a way, but if anything, it's been turned even more negative on him, which I don't think is fair to him at the end of the day, and I think that that's what Jeff is saying here also, saying disagree. It was obviously an unfair fight, how this turned out. So, yeah, so he's saying how would it have turned out? Ryan was bigger on PEDs and outside of the knockouts got outboxed. So I can see that too. And the one thing that I want for Devin to look at from this also is don't look at this because I'm still a Devin fan at the end of the day, and I will still support his career going forward. But I don't want them to look at this as okay, we only lost the fight because he popped dirty, and not look at the adjustments that they should have made in the fight. Whether or not it was still an unfair playing field, I think it was certainly an unfair playing field just on the weight alone, never mind the drug test. But I think they should look at, as you said, tightening up some of those defensive adjustments. Just like when guys win a fight by robbery and they don't adjust just because they won, I think he should kind of look at it the same way and make sure he comes back a better fighter. And I'm hoping that he does come back a better fighter because one thing he's shown is that he's willing to give us just the great fights, and he's a guy who's looking to create big moments in the sport, and I'm hoping that he's able to make a lot more of those going forward.
I I kind of agree. So actually I do agree. I think I just to kind of give more feedback. I think that Ryan Garcia is the biggest loser up front. I think in the long term, to speak to what you're saying, Haney loses more in the long term. You know what I mean? Ryan's losing the most up front because he's losing his money. He's, again, biggest win of his career, obviously, right? It gets taken away. But, and I've spoken to this and we've spoken to this as a whole at ITR. Ryan, win, lose, or draw, is going to be able to put asses in seats because he's Ryan Garcia. He's on social, like his social media following, the people that are following him, like you said, his fans, his followers, people who are fucking with him are doing it not just because of boxing. Hell, half of his fans don't give a shit. Like you said, whether he wins or loses, they're showing up for him. So, to that point, I think he'll do just fine. I think whatever his next fight is, people are still going to show up. They want to see what he'll do post, and then the people who are fucking with him because of they found him in boxing are going to be interested in the story part of it as well, right? Devin Haney's in this weird space where you weren't super exciting before this fight. Let's be real clear. You're a tactician. You're more on the side of okay, skills versus excitement, right? And yeah, but I think the reason him and his team are getting more criticism is because of the shit that they were saying. Here's one thing people have to understand: boxing fans aren't dumb, bro, and they got long memories. So you and your team are saying before the fight, 3 pounds ain't shit. I'm so much better than him that I'm gonna take his money for missing weight and I'm gonna whoop his ass because 3 pounds ain't nothing. If 3 pounds is what could beat me, then I'm not shit anyway. Okay. We remember that, right? Then let's be real clear too. Immediately after losing the fight, Then you want to use the 3 pounds as an excuse, in addition to the dirty test and all this. You got paid, you knew in advance, you're a grown ass man. You were making excuses. I go back to Terrence Crawford, right? And his fight against Errol Spence. Errol Spence could have, and he had legitimate issues before his fight with Bud. Never, not once, have you heard him say or use any of that as an excuse to the way that fight went. He took his hat off, said, "When I get back on my shit, we got to run it back." I think that's what people wanted to kind of see Devin. That's the reaction we wanted, right? Okay, he beat me. No matter how he beat me, he beat me. I got to go back to the drawing board and fix some shit, right? So that no matter what he's doing on his side, that doesn't happen again. It's been none of that. It's been, hey, only reason this happened is because of X, Y, and Z. But hold on, wait a minute. Before the fight, you were saying none of that shit mattered. I'm going to beat this dude anyway. And you're supposed to be that much better of a boxer than him. You still can't see that right hand coming. I mean, last time I checked, Austrian don't block punches.
It doesn't.
That's just me.
I do think though that if it was just the weight, I think I'd agree 100% with you. I think where the PED test comes in, and we're never gonna know the official amount and the official effect, and Devin and them could say as rebuttals, yeah, I got clipped by some of those shots, but maybe I wouldn't have been dropped 3 times. If I'm not dropped 3 times, I might have actually won that damn fight based on the rounds he controlled outside of that. So I think without the PED test, I agree because they did take the money for the weight. I think that makes it a lot harder for sure. And I think Jeff, this is going back to a couple minutes ago when I made the comments about just Ryan Garcia super fans, so that kind of believe him no matter what, just as with any famous person, not just him. But he said, "Do we want fans like that in boxing?" I think as a hardcore
Yes.
fan, yeah, I
Yes.
think it's interesting because do we want those fans to create those certain narratives? No, but I think that that's kind of just the reality that we live in now, where we're seeing some of these stars become big. Like Ryan Garcia, as becoming the star he's become, has definitely helped boxing. It helped bring us to Tank Davis fighting, grow Tank's profile a bit. Also, even though Tank was already a huge star before that, but I think that any fans that are interested in the sport as a whole do help grow the sport. Now, the ones that are in it just for a certain fighter, so I think the difference is, are you a boxing fan or a boxer fan? So I think those ones that are fans specifically of him that will make any excuse in the book for him might not be good for boxing compared to the fans of boxing as a whole. That's, I think, the way I look at it. And he's saying right here that I mean, a guy coming in overweight and a guy coming in overweight and PEDs is different. That's the thing that I would say is if it was just a weight, I would agree 100%. I think the PEDs does blur the lines a little bit there where they didn't know that right away after the fight. So they were using the weight. If it was just the weight, I'd say the same thing as you. You know what? Like, you took all that money, you thought it was going to be easy work, that he was out of shape, this and that. But I do think the PEDs does make it a little different. But at the end of the day, the jury, they have decided their decision, and I just want to see. One thing I will see is a rematch would be a hell of a fight, though. Now, talk about just the build up in that fight. We talk about biggest fights in boxing. Tank and Shakur would be a big fight. I think this fight would be right up there too if they were to run it back. Let's say next year at a comfortable weight for both guys and have no asterisks or anything next to it.
And I agree with you. I do agree with the PD. You know me. You know my stance on PDs. We've had these conversations off camera. Um, I'm what I'm saying to you is this: you can't say no matter what that man does, I'm going to whoop his ass because I'm so much superior than him that nothing he does is going to help him win the fight, and then make all the excuses in the world after you lose, right? I could see if Devin Haney came out and said, well, he popped dirty. That's probably what helped him win. But you know what? I still got to fix some shit because I should have saw that right hand coming. People don't, again, that's what I mean. When people don't forget, you were basically saying there's no way in hell Ryan Garcia beats me in this fight. There's no way. So when people hear that, they go, well, then the PED shouldn't matter, bro. You were saying you were so much better than him. He could have had another guy in there with him, and you'd have still beat him. You know what I'm saying? Stop crying is what people. This is boxing. People don't want to hear all that crying shit. That's the way it is. But again, I'm not saying that to say I agree with it. I'm just saying this is the point of view. This is why people are giving him the shit. Is what I'm saying. And to Bourbon and Boxing, to kind of retort back to that, You look at fans of Canelo. There are people who ride with Canelo no matter what. Oscar De La Hoya. There are people who are still fans of Oscar De La Hoya. You know what I'm saying? Floyd Mayweather fans, Pacquiao fans, Mike Tyson fans, hell, Tyson Fury fans. There are fanatical fans of every boxer in every sport. And in every sport, really. You look at Tom Brady fans, Michael Jordan fans, it's LeBron, etc. Right? We can go Tiger Woods, we can go on and on and on. Those fans help the sport just as much as real boxing fans do because they they're buying tickets, they're building up numbers, they get whether we like it or not, it is sometimes it's a pain in the ass to deal with as people who know the sport and aren't just fair weather fans of it. But at the end of the day, yeah, we need them. You know what I'm saying? So, I get it, but yeah, we do need them, and as much as we it pains us to have to deal with them sometimes, we do need them. But I will say this though, Ryan Garcia, I hope that you get your shit together. I hope that if you and Haney fight each other again, that you prove that the PEDs, or whatever this shit is, didn't help you at all. Because let's be real clear. If they fight again and Devin Haney works you, I mean, it'd be really hard to have you back at that point. But flip side of that, if they fight again and he knocks Haney out, well, you shut us all the fuck up then. That's the easiest way to make your point.
That's why a rematch I think is so important. And Devin and them originally didn't want a rematch. I think they were aggravated about the whole thing, but we see now that they're saying they do want to see a rematch, and I think that that would be a big thing. And that goes into this is the last point I'll make on this, but Jeff from Bourbon and Boxing saying that I think this is the first time in boxing history that the guy who got cheated has been turned into the bad guy. And I'd agree on that, legitimately. Like I said, you'd think that looking at the comments on social media that Devin was the guy who blew weight and Devin was the guy who popped 30. When in reality, he was just fighting to keep his oath that rightfully, based on the rules, he should have been able to keep. So that is why I do want to see a rematch, and that's why I'm not going to lie. I would love to see Devin win the rematch just to kind of revert all those narratives that we're seeing and just to do right by boxing at the end of the day. But will it happen? We don't know. We just got to wait and see.
I hope it does. And really quickly, so we can move on. I want everybody to understand whether it's the supplements you take, whether it is a program you're running, and we all know what that means, whether it's, what you consume as far as food, you understand you have to be responsible for all that shit. You have to know, hey, if I'm going to a restaurant, has this restaurant had any complaints about the kind of where they get their meat from, where they get their chicken from, where they, you know what I mean? Because let's be clear. If you go to a restaurant and they're getting a lot of their food from Mexico, understand that Mexico does put steroids in their food. And a lot of these restaurants, especially for those of us who live in the Southwest, where are they getting that shit from? If you live in Texas, if you live in New Mexico, parts of California, Arizona, they're getting a lot of their food from there. Not just meat and chicken, but their produce comes from Mexico. So you have to be responsible for what it is you're putting in your body, because if it shows up on a test, it doesn't matter where it came from. You're responsible for it. Period, bro. It's just like I said. It's just like that with Canelo. It was just like that with any boxer that tests dirty, or any fighter in any sport. If you test dirty, it's your responsibility. It isn't the creatine. It isn't the restaurant you ate at. None of that shit matters, because you are at the end of the day responsible for what you consume. So even whether you agree with this results or not, Ryan Garcia, serve your penalty. Hopefully, we get you guys to running back.
And the last thing I will mention, just to go off that point, because it ties in perfect with that, is my favorite story related to this is Sean Porter has said it before in an interview on his podcast, I forget where, but obviously his dad, Kenny Porter, has been his trainer for his life. And Sean had a headache one day or some pain or something like that, so he just went to a CVS order to pick up something. And his dad, when he got back in the car, was like, "What did you get?" And like kind of, and Sean was like, "I just got this for a headache or whatever. Like it ain't a big deal." And Kenny was like, "No, it is a big deal. Like you got to call a number right now, or we got to get this shit checked out because the last thing we want is something as silly as that to affect an outcome." So I think Sean has said that I believe there's a 24/7. Someone could correct me in the chat or in the comments after the show if they're wrong, but I believe there's a hotline, a 24/7 one for athletes. I don't know if it is in Vegas or where it is, but you could because you can get real time assurance of what you're taking. So you can say, okay, I'm a professional boxer. I'm fighting in this commission. If I take this, will this pop dirty or will I be clean? And they'll tell you, oh no, you could take this, or no, you shouldn't take this. Actually, if you take this, this will be clean under this and this because it doesn't have this in it. So that is always the end all be all for me. The way I look at it, Ryan Garcia clearly has enough money that he could have should have gotten those things figured out beforehand. So whether or not people question how it got in the system. The bottom line is it did get in the system, and he's got plenty of ways that he could have checked that before the fight. So as far as I'm concerned, he's got no one to blame but himself on this.
Yeah, and another thing to kind of tie that up is you'll see a lot of guys when they get to this level, they get personal chefs and personal trainers, right? Outside of boxing, right? They'll get a personal trainer that isn't a boxing trainer. They'll get a personal chef that isn't a because those and then those chefs are looking through everything that they'll get a medical staff, right? Because that and then it's that person's responsibility, that professional, to go through the details and be like, hey, like you said, with Porter and his dad. Porter's first thing he says is, hey, don't be taking that shit for your headache. We don't know if it's clean or not, because you have to have those people on your team too, because that's a lot. Let's be clear. There's a lot of information for and not most boxers aren't paying attention to that shit. So they get people on their team that are responsible for that. Whether it's the person that's preparing their food, they have to know, hey, what this guy is eating is clean. The professional staff, we can't give you X, Y, and Z for your knee pain because you won't be able to fight for however many months if we give it to you. So hey bro, that shit's important, bro.
100%. So at this point, we just got to see. I'm interested to see how this all plays out in the long run, too. Is what do we see change from this? Do we see a rematch? All those things, but only time will tell on that. But moving on now, we had a boxing decision that hit close to home. I mean, literally for me, because the guy doesn't live that far away from me. But a guy who we've had on the show, a guy who I know personally, is Abraham Nova. We saw him fight Andres Cortez on the undercard, so I know you were a big Supernova fan even before you met me. Obviously, I'm a big fan of Supernova, Mark DeLuca, and the whole team since I know those guys, been around those guys a lot the past 2 years. But it was tough to see this fight. He came in as the underdog. It was looked at not a do or die fight, but kind of like the winner is a contender and the loser kind of goes to the back of the line. Problem is, looked like my guy Abe did everything he could to win. He didn't get the decision. We've heard that story in boxing a long, lot. I mean, too many times over at this point. We talk about judging too many times. We literally, me and Dakota talked about it last week. We talked about it pretty sure the episode before that we had on how we could change these things. But what was your thought on the fight and what was your thought once they announced the decision? Because the scorecard seemed right in line 97 93, 96 94, just for the wrong guy. So, what were your thoughts on just the decision we saw last on Friday?
Just want to be clear. We're not saying this because we're homers. I I came in after the loss to Shock and told everybody I thought he lost. I picked him to win ahead of it, but real shit. Every time I watch the fight, you lost that, bro. There are things you need to change. It was a good fucking fight though. I've watched this fight a total of 3 times. Once on mute, twice with the sound. The 2 times I watched it after watching it live, I became super hypercritical of Noah because we do have that relationship with him, right? I said, let me be against him and then see how I score this fight. Even with that, I still had him winning 96-94. And that's with me trying to go against him. Um, it's the worst judging of a fight that I've seen in a long time. Obviously, the worst card I've seen this year. We talked about this pre-show. One of the judges gave, you said the same judge who gave him the 9th round, which, the Cortez, that is, he gave Cortez the 9th round. This is the same judge that didn't have. It's funny to say this, bro. He didn't have Nova winning any of the first 5 rounds. Get the fuck out of here. And again, I want to sit down, watch this fight, specifically the ninth round with that. I think it was Dave Moretti, and watch that ninth round with him and go, explain to me what part of this round you think that guy just won. I'll wait. Um, I don't get it. I don't understand. And like I said, you said it. Everybody online has said it. There's no one in the sport of boxing who's saying Cortez won that fight. And if Cortez's people are honest with themselves, they didn't think he won the fight either. You saw when he got announced as the winner, he wasn't expecting that shit. You know what I'm saying? Um, when they were reading the scorecards, we all thought, hey, that's about how I had this fight going for Nova. Then everybody's like, what? When they say Cortez, the look, man, I get it. He's a prospect. People got big money behind him. It's his hometown. Um, Abraham Nova got robbed, bro. He should be checking his pockets right now because that's how bad that robbery was. Um, and I said to this pre-fight as well, or pre-show as well. I hope and pray, because you've alluded to this, that this does not put him into a gatekeeper realm. This doesn't put him into the, oh, that guy's a bum now. He's got 2 losses in a row. No, he's got a very highly respected loss and a win that got taken from him by the judges, right? There's another thing, too. He did everything you want a guy to do in a fight, except for the game plan. We all wanted him to execute a different game plan, but if you're not going to follow a certain game plan, at least the fact that you beat the guy at what that guy does, you know what I'm saying? Clearly, I don't know if there's anything else that Nova could have done other than knock him out to get a dub.
Yeah, it's just tough to see. I mean, we see these things in boxing all the time, and I mean, I was lucky enough to win my fight, but I thought that some of the judging was interesting to say the least when I had fought, and just we see it
Bro,
all the time.
anybody who
Like,
didn't have you winning that fight is a fucking idiot, and they can argue with me all day about that shit. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah. But even like Jeff had said, just the Russell fight, the 118-109 scorecard, the Tyrone Davis fight, Elijah Garcia, the 98-92 scorecard. Luckily, the right guy won in those fights. But that's the problem too, is when you see a whack scorecard like that, and people are like, "Oh well, the right guy won," so kind of like who cares? But it's like, well, now that judge is going to get an opportunity. Dave Moretti, as you said, the same guy who, and I think there's an argument for Devin Haney beating Loma, but I don't know if there's much of an argument for Devin Haney winning the 10th round against Loma, which Dave Moretti gave to him. Now you can say, okay, well, Haney won the fight, and maybe he could have won the fight, but now Moretti goes on to do this fight, and then he fucks up this fight. So we got Jeff saying also here too. So no one is saying Nova lost. I mean, every major podcast and ESPN guys like we didn't have it like that. That's what made me feel a little better too. Because as I'm watching the fight, like I know Abraham personally. I was at his last fight in the locker room before and after the fight. So I'm like, okay, am I seeing a little bit of a different fight? Just because I know the guy and I like to think that I keep my scoring on the money. Same thing as you in the Foster fight. I thought it was a close fight, but I thought the way shot closer so with the knockdown that he did enough to win that fight. And I've said that I can be honest about that. I think that a lot of people saw it that way, but I think this fight was nothing like that. I think that it sucks because decisions like this can alter careers and alter lives in general. Like you said, Abraham, does he not make the same money now in his next fight that he would have if he won? Absolutely. And we all know that he should have won that fight, but the people who just check box record just see, like you said, the casual fans are gonna say, "Oh, he lost 2 fights in a row. I didn't know much about Cortez, this and that." Like, one thing is, if they do make him a gatekeeper, they better watch out. Whoever's the prospect going in against him, you better watch out because you're not getting a guy who's on a skid or anything like that either. And Abraham, he is a guy of strong faith, and I think that will help him kind of deal with this decision because he's always the kind of guy to say that Jesus Christ and God, they have a plan for everybody. So I think he'll kind of buy into that, which I do think will help him out mentally. And I think that he will come back better than ever. I do know that I haven't spoken to him personally, but the team does want a Cortez rematch. I think anybody in their right mind would say that they want that. Do I think they get that? Most likely not. But I do think that hopefully Top Rank does him a favor and says, okay, you you got a wrong decision in this fight, so we'll give you a really good fight in your next fight. Like we've seen that happen with guys. Like I know Edward Kid Vasquez, for example. He fought Raymond Ford. He lost. A lot of people thought he won. So Eddie Hearn's like, okay, you lost to that guy, but I'll give you a title shot against Joe Cordina because you showed that you were on a certain level. So I'm hoping that that is what happens next to Abraham. And hey, if they do put him in a gatekeeper kind of mode, people might fuck around and find out with that too. Because as I said, you're not getting a guy who's on the back end or a guy who's not coming to fight or anything like that either. So they better watch out.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that would kill me about that for him is that gatekeeper money is different, right? We all know what that is. And I agree with you. If you put a prospect in with Nova right now, especially given where he's at after this, he's got a point to prove. He's gonna your prospect's in some trouble. Um, I hope that, to your point, and you mentioned him earlier, I hope he gets the Badu Jack treatment. You know, early in his career, Badu Jack got some questionable decisions or even draw. Like it was like the judges just didn't like Badu Jack. Even in fights, it was clear he was winning. He was getting draws or losses. But he was still able to get bigger fights because people understood what it was, right? I hope this is what similar to that. This is what happens for Nova. People realize what really happened, right? I had him winning 7-3 when I was watching the fight live. Again, being hypercritical, 6-4. So if I'm looking for reasons to not give you the fight and I still have you winning, six out of the 10 rounds, there's a problem there. And trust me, I was trying. We talked about this pre-show again. Every advantage you could think of Cortez having pre-fight, it in fight, it looked like Abraham Nova was that guy, right? If you were just going off the sheet, this guy's younger. He's got more power. He's more aggressive. His style. This guy's coming off a loss. He's got stamina issues. He's never. People think he's out of shape. Maybe his chin isn't is up to par because he got knocked down against Shock. He was knocked out against Robisi. People are thinking, oh, we're teeing this guy up perfect for you, right? And he's got a name, he's got a mascot. People were ready, you know what I'm saying, this is the perfect opponent for you. You get in the ring, Cortez looks fat, he looks out of shape. He wasn't as aggressive as we would have expected him to. His power didn't seem to have the effect on, Nova that you would expect it to. Again, that's another thing these prospects got to understand. Your power at the higher level is going to be different. It's going to be taken different because these are different dudes, right? People can check me in the comments for this. I don't know if it was the 5th or 6th round. Cortez landed a punch on Nova that visibly shook Nova, right? But instead of retreating or trying to do the skate thing around the ring, Nova bit down on his mouthpiece, threw punches back, and then actually later on in the exchange forced Cortez to be the one to retreat. So even in his best punch, right, you lose the exchange. So any points I give you for landing this, and it was a beautiful punch. It was clean, it was clear, obviously had an effect on my man, but you still lose the exchange because Nova lands more of the punches. He's becomes more aggressive and backs you up. You're losing even when you're winning. So to me, there was just no, especially in the 9th round. I keep going back to that. There's no way in the hell anybody with 2 working eyes and common fucking sense gives that round to Cortez. And to me, that's one of the biggest indicators that the job was on. Not only did you have him winning 5 rounds in the beginning as a shutout, but you gave him the obvious round he lost. I don't think there's a way to explain that.
Yeah, no, Teddy Atlas used to always say that it's either incompetence or corruption. I think we might have had a little bit of both in there on Friday night, but we got Pops in the building too. Just echoing our points about just the only thing Top Rank can do is just kind of keep Nova up with their schedule and keep him in the same level of fights. And that's what I think should happen because Yeah, he lost the fight, quote unquote, but he's still a top 10 guy at 130. I think if anything, some people might hold him in a higher standard after Friday night than they did before Friday night, because as you said, some people had the questions about, okay, you looked great against Shock early, but then you kind of faded a bit on the stretch. Wasn't the case in this fight. First round, they were even and punches landed 5-5. Cortez outlanded Abraham in round two, and then Abraham outlanded him in every single round the rest of the way. Even thrown punches, round 7, 8, 9, and 10. Abraham threw 99, 113, 120, then 80 punches to wrap things up, doubling Cortez in throwing punches in almost all those rounds, too. So that just showed that, as Tim Bradley was saying on the broadcast, too, like, oh, he's going to get this one. He's not trying to not leave any stone unturned. Problem is that, and it was a good fight. I wish the judges had been able to see it, but unfortunately they did not. But that's the last thing I want to say on this, too, is just that he outlanded him. And there's one thing, if one guy outlands another guy, but the other guy has the more powerful shots, I'd say, okay, you know what? Like, I can see how a decision goes a certain way. Frank Martin against Tank. There were a few rounds, I think, in those middle rounds where, yeah, Frank might have landed more punches, but Tank's punches meant so much more that I was still giving those rounds to Tank. This fight was not that. Abraham was the more heavy-handed guy, and he was landing more punches. Yeah, when he was getting hit clean at times, but that's also because he was throwing so many fucking punches and landing a good amount of punches too. So you're bound to, if you're throwing 120 punches in a round, guys, you're bound to get hit clean a few times. I know that seems crazy. Everyone wants everyone to be perfect, but you're bound to get hit a few times. But if you're dishing out more than what you're taking, and you're the guy who's got more thud and, like you said, more effect on your punches, I just don't see how the decision can go that way. And it's just, as Jeff saying here, boxing needs to allow these guys to dispute bad cards and fight decisions. That was something you had said pre-show. Also, you had mentioned that, and also we need to hold these refs, these judges accountable too. They've said it on their platform, Bourbon and Boxing. We've said it on ours. We did a whole segment about this, like what, a couple of weeks ago, not even that long ago, about how we can change these kind of things. But there's got to be something, like you said. Either they got to explain their reasoning, or we got to start hitting out some of these suspensions the same way we do for fighters or trainers and all these kind of things. But man, there's something that's got to be done, and we've always stood up for guys and for bad decisions, even if we don't know these guys. But now knowing a guy like this, knowing all the hard work he's put in, knowing how close he came to a title in February, knowing that this was his shot to get him right back from the mix. If he wins this fight, there's a good chance he fights the winner of Navarrete and Valdez. Now that all gets taken from him, and it just ain't fair at the end of the day. Not to him, not to Maxie Hughes, not to any of these guys that have been on the wrong end of these decisions these last couple of years, and in the history of boxing. But hey.
You know what though? You mentioned it earlier. I want to take my hat off to Nova and how he handled himself after the fight. Because after getting jobbed that way, he could have been well within his rights to be complaining, to be cursing, or be indignant. He was respectful. He acted like a man of God. He acted like a man of value and morals. He said, "Hey, look, this is boxing. At the end of the day, I don't know what else to tell you. I thought I did enough to win this fight. I thought I was." He even said it. I thought I won 6-4. Again, I had him 7-3. He said, I think I did enough. Um, and I don't know what else to tell you. We go back to the drawing board. We fix what we got to fix, and I think he will. So I want to applaud him not only for his performance in the ring, but after the fight and the way he handled that L. Because again, there are a lot of guys. Nobody would have been mad at him if he'd have been completely belligerent. You know what I mean? Least of all me. I was belligerent enough for him. So hats off to him for that. I do think that there's needs to be some sort of commission that reviews fights like that, right? Where it's not necessarily the close decisions, because we've all seen guys lose a fight, you know, wide, but all the rounds were close. So we're like, well, they're just giving all the close rounds to the other guy. You know what I'm saying? Again, to your point, this wasn't that. This was a guy who was clearly winning the rounds and wasn't getting any of them. So it makes you think, why is that? Right? Like you said, it's either incompetence or corruption or a little bit of both. I can't argue with it. There's nothing I can say about that. And again, I'm not trying to say that Dave Moretti is incompetent or he's corrupt, but turning in a scorecard like that, I have questions. that I'd like to be answered. Probably never get them. Hats off to Nova, man. We love him to death, and I hope he gets another shot. And you know what? For Cortez's part, I hope he learns from this. I hope that he doesn't just take that dub as well. Yeah, I got to win. Let me go party. Nah, man, you got some shit to fix, bro. You got some holes in your game you need to fix. You too reliant on your power. I'm gonna tell you, just like Berlinga and all these other guys, power is great when you're fighting guys below your level or at your level. When you're fighting A side fighters or guys on the championship level, and let's be real clear, Nova proved he's a championship level fighter when against Foster. He's a knockdown away from having a draw and maybe a rematch. So with a world champion that is respected around, universally. So when you're fighting a guy of that caliber, you've got to have more in your arsenal than just power. Of course, unless your name's Tank. So there that goes.
Yeah, but like I said, even Tank's got a lot more in his arsenal too when he kind of gets deep in his bag. But yeah, as you said, last thing I want to say on this, but their reaction, him and his coach Mark DeLuca, post fight just kind of shows the kind of people that they are. There's a lot of 30 people in the sport of boxing, but I think those guys and their team are not people like that. Like I said, they've always been stand-up individuals. Anyone who's on our platform, they've seen the videos. I'm sure we've had both those guys on this channel. We spoke to Abraham just about a week before his fight, but I can tell you guys in the hours I've spent with both of those guys and their whole team that they are just as genuine off camera as they are on camera. And I think you saw that in that moment where, like you said, they could have flipped shit on there and nobody would have complained about a damn thing that they would have done or said out there. But what did they do? Abraham kind of shrugged his shoulders. Mark shook the hand of Andres Cortez's brother, and then that was it. So I do think that them being led by faith and just the way they carry themselves will help them deal with something like this. As fucked up as it is, they shouldn't have to deal with it. But they're the kind of people made for something like this, and I got no doubt that we're going to see the best version of Abraham Nova. That we're still yet to see the best version of him. Just look at, as I said, the differences from the Robesi fight, how he rebounded against Adam Lopez, how he looked against Shock, and then how he turned that into this fight. And I think he still fought some of Cortez's fight in this fight. As you said, I think sometimes when you get in there, even I noticed this in my fight, it's like, yeah, you want to box and do all those things, but sometimes you just got to dog it out. That's exactly what he did, and I can't wait to see what is next for him because his story is definitely not written yet.
And I want to say this, and I know, look, you got to follow the money, bro. When you're fighting a guy, especially a prospect that has all these teams of people, this money, the machine behind him, and you're fighting in his backyard. People forget Cortez is from Vegas. He's fighting out of Vegas in Vegas. And for those that may be watching or to watch later on YouTube, um, or might not even know too much about Abraham Nova, he's an East Coast guy. Him and you know him and ours truly, Jack, training, fight in the same gym a couple of times. They've Jack can go reach out to this guy, see him in person. It's an East Coast guy on the West Coast, Nevada of all places. You have to understand the assignment too. You're not just fighting the guy in front of you. You're fighting the team and machine behind him. You're fighting his hometown. These are things, Jack, found this out, and he was fighting a guy, just a couple neighborhoods over, but he's fighting a guy in his city, in his place, and almost lost because, they're looking at it and they're judging it, differently, maybe with their emotions more than their reality, and logical sense. So, you were almost a victim of this. Nova's now a victim of it. We've seen victims of this over and over and over again. Understand the assignment when you're fighting some of these guys, not just the prospects who got a big money, but some of these dudes like, just guys in their hometown. You could be fighting another journeyman guy in his hometown and people there love him, right? We say this all the time, support local boxing. Not like that. You know what I mean? So you support them, but don't cheat.
support him fairly. I agree 100%. But one thing we're going to get into now, this is kind of a topic we've been wanting to do. We were off, in and off for a few weeks, and we kind of passed it by, but this is the perfect time to bring it up. So I'll kind of let you take the lead on this and kind of talk about what goes into building a prospect in today's age, wherever you want to take that, and also just some of the good, some of the bad, and the challenges that sometimes come with it.
It's a good question, man. And I think that building a prospect is all about one, finding the prospect first, right? Finding a guy that's got the tools, got that has the goods. Sometimes it's just finding a popular kid who's got a style that can sell, a style that you can work with, right? And then putting him through the paces, seeing can he test it, can he work it, what can he do against some other dogs in the gym. Um, but what we see a lot in this new age of prospecting is a lot of these guys, you don't find out what they're made of until it's too late, right? You get these big money machines behind these guys. You get you know all this love until you lose or you have a bad fight. Then you see the promoters kind of go away from you. You see the money not as big. You see, the team and the machine, all those people who were there for you, in the beginning. So it's a little bit of both. Like we've got these guys that are getting built up. They're getting easy touches, but as soon as they get put in hard and either take a L or look bad, everybody's like, I don't want to deal with that. And that's because most of the time building these prospects isn't a homegrown thing. They're finding these kids, who are doing well in certain markets, taking them and putting all this money into them to get them bigger fights, but they're not really invested in them. They're just invested in their careers and how much money they can make for them. And we see it all the time, guys that don't work out. I mean, you know, because they're not being given the real tests. We've seen over the history, I mean, I can name a million prospects that blew the pooch. I mean, I think the biggest flop as a prospect that I can remember growing up was Audley Harrison. He was the heavyweight that everybody thought was the next thing. He flopped. I think he ended up 31-7. He was trash. I think all 7 of his losses were knockouts. I mean, this dude was absolutely horrible. You got the Francisco Bajados of the world. The chin checkers. Oh my God! I don't know if anybody in the chat remembers those Jadon Codrington and Curtis Stevens. These dudes were in rap videos. They were being backed by music moguls and shit like that. These dudes were all over they're from New York. They had this whole persona, and they were called the chin checkers because of their knockout power. But the one thing they forgot to bring with them was their own chins. They both end up with horrible devastating knockout losses. Hank Lundy, we've had him on before. He was a prospect fighting on ESPN all the time, got some good wins, and then just kind of fell off. Jalen Love, he was with Team Mayweather, TMT, that whole movement, completely underwhelmed. And the reason is because, yeah, they look really good when they're fighting bums. But the second they get to that second level, right, either one or two things isn't happening. Either the people who are promoting them or the people who are behind them aren't pushing them, right? We've had this conversation kind of a little bit off kilter, but about Wilder, right? People were so in love with his power, he wasn't getting training and everything else, and then we saw what happened when the power doesn't work. You know what I mean? You look at the Jalen Loves of the world, this dude was knocking people out. The second he got in there with somebody who wasn't going to follow the assignment, right, he took his first L. Hank Lundy was outboxing just about everybody. As soon as he found somebody that could hurt him, he kind of goes away. Joel Julio, the love child. I mean, again, we go on and on. Ricardo Williams is a guy who's actually undefeated and just kind of went away. I don't know what happened there. You know what I mean? I think he's, excuse me, I want to say he's like, what is he like? 12, 13 and 0. He something like that. Not a lot of fights, undefeated, and then just kind of falls off the face of the earth. There are a lot of prospects like that. We want to see more consistency. If you got a prospect, put them in hard early, right? And then if they lose or don't have a great fight, don't throw them away. Fix the shit that made them lose or have a bad fight. Take them back to the drawing board and then put them back into the fire. Um, one that's one thing I love about Nova. After each one of his losses, it wasn't an excuse. It wasn't a let me look for something easy. He took a L, came right back, fought hard competition, and grew and got better. Even with this fight that we just talked about, with him losing to the prospect, he looked way better. You know what I mean? He looked like he could have gone 15 rounds as opposed to 12. Whereas before, by round 8 or 9, we see him gassing out visibly, right? You see him just, oh man, his legs are gone. This was completely not that. As a matter of fact, I think he had his strongest rounds later in 9, 10, and like you said, 9, 10, 11, 12. He's having, you know what I mean? Because he's fixing those things. His team, the Mark Luca and all those, right? They're not running away from him because of losses or a bad fight. They're actually doubling down and putting more into him, to get him up. And then it's on the fighter too. The fighter has to buy into that. The fighter, you can have a guy who's got all the support in the world, but if you're not taking the information in, if you think you are bigger than you are, and you're not listening to your team or willing to take criticism, you're going to fail as well. So, you know, I've said what I've said, but I think that, again, we get these big name prospects. They get the money, they get the location, they get the hometown fights, they get decisions they shouldn't get, but then they get into these bigger fights and they're not. What do I say all the time? Fall in love with the shit you do bad, so that the shit you do well shines even more. A lot of these kids don't work on the shit that they're not doing well, and then boom, we end up having a guy who misses weight and looks completely out of shape and still gets a win. But here's the thing that bothers me about that. When Cortez gets his next fight, right? Is he still going to take that same mentality he had? Well, it worked against Nova, right? What happens when he gets in there with somebody else who's even, maybe a step or two above Nova, right? Or they give him a title fight because of this Nova fight. He's not ready at all at this moment in time because, hey, bro, you got a gift, against the guy that beat you really in the ring. But is that going to take you and your team and make you learn from this? I hope they do, because all too often we've seen it a million times. Nobody learns with these prospects. They just kind of throw them in there, try to make as much money as they can, and as soon as they stop making that money, they're out of here.
Yeah, you summed it up perfectly. And the one thing I want to touch on here, first of all, is also the difficulty because obviously for a prospect, the main goal is to get signed by a major promoter. If you don't, you're kind of left out in the wilderness. I know that most people are backing behind them, but different coaches or respectful people have always said, on average, it's probably $100,000 to get strength and conditioning programs, to get training, to get opponents, all those kind of things. Probably even more than that if you're going to pay for opponents to build them up. So just the difficulty it is for those guys who aren't signed by major promoters. And also, as you said, that lose early on is not the end of the world. Macy Ramirez lost his pro debut. He's doing just fine right now. The guy who's fighting this weekend, Elvis Rodriguez. First of all, he lost to Kenny Sims, which is not the worst. Kenny Sims, another guy who lost a couple times and now is waiting for a title shot. But Elvis Rodriguez loses to Kenny Sims in a close fight. Top rank cuts him. He goes to PBC, picks up couple of huge wins, knocks out Victor Postal, beats Joseph Adorno, and now Top Rank brings him back, and they're gonna probably give him a title fight soon. So it just shows that all these things sometimes people overreact. And the one thing I do want to say is that it's always you got to find the fine line between padding your record and just kind of learning on the job, but also doing it against quality opponents too. And I think Top Rank with some guys they do it great. Like I think the way they brought along a guy like Shushu has been kind of perfect, where they've given him just enough professional resistance where he's going to win all these fights, but they've given him just enough so he's ready now when he gets to the highest level. And every time he steps up, he gets better with it. We've seen with other guys, sometimes those guys are not learning anything. As we've always said, you're going to learn more in an 8 round decision than you ever will in a 30-second knockout. So I think all these guys that pick up these first round knockouts, you mentioned Berlanga before, he's learned way more since the knockout streak ended about himself. And I think he's became a way better fighter now and a legit contender, borderline top 10 guy than he ever was with the knockout streak, even though the hype of him was so much more back then. He's a way better fighter now because of it. And the risk of losing, the higher risk of losing that you have, even if it goes from, let's say, a 0% chance to a 10% chance of losing in a fight, it gives you so much more of a quality experience and you learn so much more from it. Is even, yeah, you're still the favorite in this fight, but if you have a guy giving you enough resistance, I think that's what we want to see more from these prospects, and especially if they're featured on TV. As you said, Wilder was brought along for a long time. But a lot of people he wasn't on TV, so nobody really cared as much, and it wasn't like, oh, he's 18-0 fighting this cab driver, but nobody cared because it wasn't on TV. If you're going to put those fights on an ESPN or an ESPN Plus, people are expecting, okay, yeah, I mean, this guy's going to win his fight, but we want to see him in against a guy who at least looks the part. And we see guys go in there with like long tube socks and basketball shoes on and basketball shorts on, and we're like, okay, like this guy ain't gonna put up a good fight. He's kind of like crossing his hands, doesn't even know how to put his hands up, stuff like that. So I think that's what we want to see is the higher risk of chance you have of losing, the more you're going to learn from it. And it doesn't even mean you have to be in a 50-50 fight. You just need to see enough resistance where you're able to grow from it.
And to kind of to touch on that too, right? Is that you get guys. I want to go back to the chin checkers and Jadon Codrington. Jadon Codrington was undefeated. He was, mowing through guys, and someone in his team had the bright idea to match him against Alan Green. People who forgot who Alan Green was at that time, he was a monster. He was a complete monster. He was the prospect Jadon wishes he had been at that point, right? But because of the hype train, they thought, oh, well, he can get in here and get a dub on this guy who's got a big name, right? But the difference is Alan Green was actually fighting legit fighters up, more legit competition than Jadon was. And then you throw him in there, and again, he hasn't been able to work on any of the stuff that, he does bad. He gets in there, he gets obliterated, and then people forget about him. Like you said, you look at Berlanga, again, the hype train was so huge with the streak, right? Now some of that love is gone because he's not knocking people out. But again, like you said, he's getting more experience. He's learning more about himself in the game of boxing than he ever did, knocking people out because he's having to face adversity. He's having to figure some shit out. There's nothing to figure out when you get in first round knockouts, bro. You know what I mean? What do you learn? Like you said, what are you learning from that? I can hit really hard. You know what I mean? But what else? You know what I mean? I think, he's been on the channel, Elijah Garcia. I think Elijah Garcia will learn more from his loss than he did any of his wins, right? Because now you've got to figure some shit out. And to his credit, I think he's got a great team behind him, and I think he's going to be in a position to figure that out and move forward. But again, we've seen it on and on and on, where these guys get drunk, especially guys with power. They get drunk with that. They think, oh, this is the only thing I need to win. And yeah, again, if you're Deontay Wilder, who has an eraser of a right hand, especially in the heavyweight division, you can do it. But what happens again, when that goes away and you have to use other things, it becomes, you get into some deep ass waters and, not everybody can swim. So, these prospects, I hope and pray that if you've got a prospect that's got some talent, that's, and it doesn't, like, I hate to reference this, right? But, P. Diddy used to always say it's showtime at the gate. It's not showtime once you hit the stage. It's showtime at the studio. It's showtime, in the hours before you get there. That's what that is also here in boxing. It's showtime when you show up to the gym at 3, 4, or 5 o'clock in the morning. When you're out there running your rounds. When you're out there, the competition you face at the gym needs to be just as stiff if not stiffer than what you're going to face in the ring, right? Because if you're going through light touches in the gym, you really not going to know what the fuck you're doing when you get in the ring. Jack, you used to play football, so you'll learn. You'll love this, right? Imagine a team that doesn't tackle in practice. How much success are they going to have when they get into the game? Not much. You know what I'm saying? So you want to hit harder, excuse me, in practice than you do when you get on the field, because then you're ready for it. Somebody hits you up like, oh yeah, that was cool, but my teammate hit me harder than that last week. Get out of here. Great example, Jared Anderson. Look, I get exhausted talking about that guy, right? Has the toughest competition of his career, and then he's basically gone backwards since then. So I don't know, man. And maybe I'm just talking out of my ass, but if you've got a prospect, put them through the paces before they ever even climb into the ring against a guy that counts. Because when they get in there, they're going to understand how this shit works. And then when they get that resistance, right? Okay, cool. I've already been through that. Like you said, in your first fight, right? You already been through that. So you got a little pushback. You said, okay, cool. But you knew how to figure that out. And you worked it out. Boom, there it is. But if you're not getting that work in the gym, if they're not pushing you and kicking your ass in that gym, then when you get in that ring, you're not figuring anything out. You're just trying to stick to that one trick that right? Or just your natural abilities. And that's just not going to work in the professional.
And I think to your point, all those are perfect analogies. I think, and even sometimes if you do put all the work in the gym, if you're not being tested in the ring, sometimes those skills can kind of go stale a bit because you're not having to go deep in that bag. You're going deep in that bag with headgear on in the gym with 16-ounce gloves, but if you're not doing it with the 8 or 10-ounce gloves with no headgear, it's a little different. That's like my guy, Boo Boo Andrade. I think we saw a bit of that of him in his career. He was winning a lot, coasting in a lot of these fights. So once he got to fight, and he was in his mid 30s, not fighting at an optimal weight class. When he fought against a guy like David Benavidez, the shit that he had been doing and getting by with against his last 10 opponents before that, he wasn't able to do against a guy like David. So that's the one thing you got to look out for too. And then also to not move these guys too fast sometimes also, because I think you got to find the happy medium in between. I mean, shit, a guy like Abdullah Mason. I mean, I'm gonna be real. Right now, Denis Berinchek, great fighter from Ukraine, the guy who just beat Navarrete. I would put a good amount of money that Abdullah Mason would beat him if they fought tomorrow. But do you give Abdullah Mason that fight right now? Because then you're putting him in the title picture. Like, that's the thing that's tricky, and they're not going to do that. And I wouldn't do that right now either. But you look at a guy like him where he's a top 10 lightweight right now. I don't care what anybody says about resume, this and that. There's not 10 dudes at lightweight beating him right now. But you're not going to move him like a top 10 lightweight fighter right now because you don't want to shorten the shelf life and put him in these tough fights that even if he wins, you start accumulating that damage and starting that clock earlier than you should. So that's what I think is interesting when you have these top level prospects, which is what most of these promoters are dealing with is you don't want to move them too slow, but you also don't want to move them too fast either, like we saw. And this guy's rebounded since, but like an Erickson Lubin going in there against Jermell Charlo, what was a great prospect of the year. You go in, you get knocked out in the first round in that fight. And he's came back and got some good wins since then, but kind of never had the same hype since then. And he's still been a great fighter. I'm always going to be a fan of Eric Lubin, but I think that's what's tricky is finding the happy medium about giving some resistance, but not giving too much and putting your guys in deep waters yet without training them how to swim.
Great point. I mean, I think part of that too, that trickiness that you're talking about is realizing what you have too, right? Like, do you have a Loma that you can put in title fights his second fight in? Do you have a Clarissa Shields who can fight anybody out the gate, or do you have a slow burner? Do you have a guy that needs 15, 20 fights before he starts fighting the bigger names and moving in that direction, right? Do you have a guy that is a banger versus a boxer? You have a guy who's, going to go in there and give you highlight real shit, but, might not have it all together upstairs. You need to, teach him some things mentally, because we all know the mental game is big, if not more, troublesome for some of these guys than their physical attributes, and sometimes they need to go through that shit. Like Tank said, going to prison, changed him. Like, hey, look, I got a whole different outlook now, and you kind of saw him a little bit more in shape, a little bit, but more resolved than he used to, which is saying something. But you need that also. And to your point before, you said these guys that are taking these L's early. Look at Bernard Hopkins. I mean, he lost his first pro fight. He's one of the goats. You know what I'm saying? Manny Pacquiao.
Marquez lost his pro debut, I think. Also, Pacquiao had a few losses early on.
Right. Nobody is saying shit about, I mean, Canelo took a draw early, in his career against a guy he should have wiped the floor with. Nobody's talking shit about that because of what they've done. And again, they stuck with it. This is boxing. Like Nova, to quote our man Nova, shit happens. But do you throw away your whole career because of, one fight? No, you keep going at it, bro. Just imagine. Could you imagine if Bernard Hopkins wouldn't have gotten any more fights, or his team wouldn't have gotten promoted or anything like that after losing his pro debut?
Or if he just quit too and thought, listen, I lost my first pro fight. This ain't for me. Nobody loses their first pro fight.
Right. You know what I mean? Pacquiao. Could you imagine Pacquiao back in the day losing and being like, all right, fuck this. I'm going to go get me a job, farming or some shit. Are you serious? You know what I'm saying? Or even guys who don't lose, but they take a tough fight. Like, could you imagine if Floyd after the Castillo fight had been like, man, this ain't for me. I can't, I ain't fucking with these dudes no more, and hanging it up because he had a rough night at the office. Like, that's another thing too, bro. A lot of these kids are fragile nowadays. It's like,
Yeah,
get out of here.
another one is a perfect example of that, and this will be the last thing I'll say on this topic. But Andre Ward is a perfect example of that too. Last gold medalist we've had in the Olympics, but he was kind of a slow burner out the gate. People wanted him to fight this guy, fight that guy, but he kind of slowly took it out. And even he had the fight with Darnell Boone. Now Darnell Boone, if you guys don't know who he is, just think about the best gate, like probably maybe the best under 500 fighter of all time. Honestly, he should have beat Sergey Kovalev the first fight that they had, and he dropped Andre Ward hard when they fought. Looking back on it now, I mean, nowadays, if that fight would have happened, I think social media is what's caused a lot of just opinions on these prospects because all these fights are on TV and everybody's seeing these fights. Think about that. If that Andre Ward Darnell Boone fight had happened this day and age, would be, Andre Ward doesn't have a chin. Like, he's never going to be able to make it. He's never going to get people's respect with his punches, this and that. So you hear so many of those things now. Now, he had the mental, like you said, to go back and realize, okay, no, I took that shot, but I got up from that shot, and then I won the rest of the fight. I ended up going to have a Hall of Fame career, never lost in the ring. But I think that's what's so different about, like I said, the way people are wired these days and also the reactions that they get. Shoot, we see guys win every round of fights and get criticized nowadays. Never mind what all the greats used to have. Sugar Ray Leonard was dropped early in his career. All these guys have had shit happen earlier on in their career. We just didn't see it as much. And I think that's a big component with all this also. It's these fights, not as many low-level fights were televised as they are now.
And here's another thing too, realizing that not every guy is going to be a world champion. Not everybody's going to be Andre Ward, Floyd Mayweather, Manny Pacquiao, Terrence Bud Crawford, Errol Spence, not Tank. Not everybody's going to be that, right? You look at Mickey Ward and Arturo Gatti, right? They weren't even world champions when they fought, but those three fights, right? Universally, when people say, if you were to look up your ideal box, like if you're introducing someone to the sport of boxing, you say, hey, go watch Mickey Ward and Arturo Gatti. If they don't love that, then this sport ain't for them. You know what I'm saying? But these guys weren't world champions, and they both had multiple losses on their record when they fought. Imagine that. Imagine either one of those guys hanging it up. Because let's face it, Mickey Ward had a day job, when he first, for a long time when he was still fighting. Same with Arturo Gatti until they got into the bigger money fights, basically until they fought each other. Imagine either one of those guys, not world champions, couple losses, says, you know what, fuck this, I'm out. I'm gonna go back to the shipyard, or I'm gonna go, get me a union job, or I got to feed my family. I'm gonna toss trash for a living, whatever it, or put on a suit and tie, whatever. Imagine that. We would have never gotten Ward and Gotti. If these two guys who gave us, boxing gold, right, would have said, "Hey, fuck it, I'm out of here." You also have to understand. That's again when I say don't throw these guys away because they're not world champions or they're not, the biggest names in the sport. Sometimes we need the Wards and the Gottis. Sometimes we need the Pitbull Cruises, right? The Pitbull Cruz, another example. He took some losses early. Team to give up on him. Now he's a champion at 140 pounds. You know what I mean? And he's just your typical, come forward guy. There's nothing super special about him. And I say that by saying, that there's no frills. He does what he does, and he's really good at doing it, right? But imagine again, all these guys. The list can go on and on and on. If you gave up on them, or if they gave up on themselves, understanding again what you have as a prospect, and then as a promoter, what you have in your prospect, and treating him as such.
100%. And my final message will tie in perfectly with that is when we're looking at these prospects, kind of just what we say a lot of time on this show is just appreciate the journey that they're taking us on. Because we're kind of, when you watch these guys, there are a lot of dudes on Top Rank where I've watched every single one of their pro fights. Legitimately. Because they turn pro on Top Rank undercards and they're probably going to see every fight they have until they retire. None of them are finished products right now. That's the whole point of being a prospect. Any of us, when we got a job, if let's say if someone works a job for 15 years, yeah, your first 3 years in that job, obviously you're not going to be as good as you were in your eighth, 10th, and 12th year. So look at it the same way with these prospects. They're learning each and every fight. None of them are finished products. If they were finished products, then they would be pound for pound world champions. The thing is, everybody has to get there. All the pound for pound champions we have right now were prospects once upon a time because they weren't ready yet either. So I think that's what people need to realize and just appreciate the journey these guys are on. Like you said, whether they win a fight and struggle, whether they lose a fight and struggle, don't throw these dudes away either because we just named. I mean, there's 100 more examples that we didn't even name off the top of our head of guys who have righted the wrongs and went on to have great, if not Hall of Fame careers. So just enjoy the journey that these guys are on and just don't be as judgmental. Fight the fight. And I mean, everybody's got a right to have an opinion. We come on here sometimes. We say, yeah, this guy, he didn't do this, or he didn't look great in here. Yeah, that's all well and good, but you still look at the general state of, yeah, this is an 18 or 19-year-old kid, and they still got a long way to go. And when this great was this years old, they struggled just the same exact way.
With that being said, bro, who's your favorite prospect right now? You know what I mean? Who's got you excited about where they're going?
I got two of them now. Abdullah Mason would have to be one. I think that's an easy one. I think to me he's the best prospect in boxing. I don't even think that's a hot take anymore. I think that's just most people would agree with that. And the other one who I think that we talk about these guys who have families in boxing that get kind of over credit. Shout out to Nico Ali Walsh and Campbell Hatton, great guys, but I think they've gotten more credit than they deserve just based on their name. But Fernando Vargas' son, Emiliano Vargas, doesn't get nearly the credit he deserves because that's a bad, bad boy right there, too. He's going to be fighting Friday night, and him and Abdullah Mason are my two favorite prospects. It's funny how Emiliano's kind of slid under the radar because he is Fernando Vargas' son, but that dude is a real deal, too. Can switch stances, cut off the ring, box, bang, do it all. That's the super fight that I want to see 10 years down the road, and I can't wait to just see, like I said, the journey that those two take me on until then. But those are my guys.
Bro, you know what? I was gonna say that because I'm gonna tell you something. The Vargas boys, period. Like, Emiliano, I think he's the best of the. He's the cream of the crop as far as what we've seen so far. But I'm gonna tell you something. The Vargas boys together, I don't know if they're all gonna end up being world champions, but I think if you haven't already checked them out, I think the Vargas brothers are gonna be I think they're all going to have successful careers, bro. I think at some point, if not challenge for, if not win a world title at some point, because Fernando Vargas Sr. is doing it correctly, right? He's putting his boy through the paces correctly. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the Gary Russells, right? They've all taken some losses now, but back when Pops was alive, he was raising them boys right. Like he had them in the gym. I mean, RIP to Pops Russell. I really do think if he was still alive, I think those two younger Russells would still be undefeated. I think he was that glue. I think he was doing it the right way. And I say that just to draw a comparison. I think Fernando is doing a great job with his boys. So hats off to you to there. I don't know if we consider Shushu a prospect anymore, but he's my guy. Like I love Shushu, bro. Like I love everything about Shushu. I think Shushu. I think he's. I don't know. He's kind of like it's a weird place. Like I think he's still a prospect, but not. You know what I mean? I think he's above a prospect, but he still kind of is. So I'm holding on to it because I think he hasn't quite left. He's got one foot out of the prospect door, and I'm still holding on to the other foot. That's my guy.
And hey, that's a great dude too. I've met him in person a couple times. Me and Dakota saw him in February, so that's my second time I've met him. But he's a great dude too. And as you said, I think to me, I view him as more of a contender. But hey, if he's a prospect, and put him back on my list with those other two guys because he's someone certainly to follow. And Jeff was asking this, and there are three of them. I'm guessing the Vargas brothers. Yeah, there's three of them. So Emiliano's the youngest one, and he's been boxing since he was a kid. He's a multi-time amateur national champion. The other two, and you can tell by because he's the only one signed with Top Rank. The other two, Fernando Jr. and Amato, got into boxing later on. I think they were in high school by the time they got into boxing. Fernando Jr. might have already graduated high school. Fernando was a basketball player. I think Amato was a football player. So they got into the sport because they saw Emiliano having all the success. So I think you're seeing also what the Pops is doing, where Emiliano started to step up his competition more, even though the other guys are older. They're on a bit of a slower trajectory just because they started late, as like any late starter is. Amato is really athletic. Fernando Jr. can punch a lot, so I think that's going to help him skip the line a bit. But I think they're doing a great job moving all those guys separately too. It's not a one size fits all the way you move any of these prospects. And I think Fernando's the right guy to do it because we talk about guys who thrown in there too early. He beat the Ike Cortez in the Winky Wrights of the world, but he had all those fights, the Trinidad fight, the Oscar fight. He had all these fights before he turned 25 years old. We talk about guys nowadays not even fighting anybody tough until they're 25 years old. So I think Fernando's the perfect guy to mix in with to move those guys because he was moved probably a bit too fast. And just think about all the big fights and the money opportunities that he missed on because he got out of the game so early.
It's almost it's Jack. Really, it's almost a perfect combination of everything we just talked about in the prospect
Hmm.
world, right? You've got a son who's been doing it pretty much. That's the only sport. Then you got two sons who came in later, and he's moving each one of them differently.
Hmm.
We just talked about it, right? Like know what you have, right?
Yeah.
You've got
Hmm.
the one kid who's basically like a boxing savant. It looks like when he gets in
Yeah.
there. You got one kid who can just knock everybody the fuck out, but he's got some holes. And you got the other guys a little bit more well rounded, but again, he got in late. So he's moving each one of them differently. And this is the same father, right? Usually we get, and you've seen it, you get a dad who wants to move everybody the same. If you've got,
Hmm.
multiple sons fighting, let's do, I want, if one son is doing this, I want the other son to do it too. You know what I mean? And it's like, no, and again, hats off to Fernando for doing that. He's moving each one of his boys differently for the same goal. I love it, bro. I love what he's doing.
100%. Last thing before we get out of here, Jeff's asking us, what are your thoughts on Troy Isley? I'll say this because Troy fought last weekend. If we consider
Mm-hmm.
him a prospect, he's one of my favorite prospects too. I saw him fight in person last year. Didn't get to meet him or talk to him or anything, but he's the kind of guy that I talk about with prospects a lot, where he doesn't do anything that might jump out to the casual fan, but that's what makes him such a good prospect also, where he's not relying on his power. He's not going in against overmatched opponents and just blowing them right out of the way. These dudes he's fighting, he fought Vladimir Hernandez, great guy to fight. He's continuing to fight good, quality, respectable veterans in the sport, and I love what I'm seeing from Troy Isley. I think he gets better each and every fight out. The Bomac team seems like a great pairing for him, so I think that he's almost right. We talk about again how you move a prospect. I think he's about ready to jump in the mix at 160 right now. So I think they might take a few more fights, but man, I love me some Troy Isley. I think that he's the most underrated prospect in all of boxing, and I think that that's a pretty fair statement. I don't think anyone would say that that's crazy.
I don't. I think he's a five-tool guy. I think you look at he's got some defensive holes. If I'm being nitpicky, that I'd like to see him shore up. But other than that, bro, I mean, I think you're right. I think you could put him in with the top 15 if not top 20, top 15 guys right now. Top 10 might be a little early. You know what I'm saying? Um, but maybe not. Like the bottom half of that top 10 at 160, because 160 is a little thin right now, right? We say that all the time. It's not the division it used to be back when B Hop and all them were running it. The Andre Wards and so on, even the Kelly Pavlik's era and all that. So it's a little bit thinner, but I think yeah, I think dude's maybe 2-3 fights away from being a champ or getting a shot.
No, for sure. And I think he's the perfect example of how you move a guy like that too, where you give him some good fights, easy fights early on, but then I think they're moving him the right way, where they're giving him just enough resistance where Vladimir Hernandez is a really competitive and close fight, but he's able to eke out a decision in that, learn so much, so that when he's fighting those other guys at that level, now he's starting to show more separation in those fights. So that's about it for episode 30. We touched on a lot of topics in here. Be on the lookout to see, because I know we do have fights on Saturday. Bam Rodriguez and Juan Estrada. We have Teofimo, Steve Claggett, Robesi Ramirez, Emiliano Vargas, Elvis Rodriguez, Rohan Polanco. Regular top rank on the card we got too. So be on the lookout. Maybe later this week we drop a preview show for that, or we just recap it next week. We shall see. I don't know if the boxing shop is going on Monday. If they are, go support them. I know Felix in here was saying that he was showing his support to us. So I think me and Nibs are gonna have to go see a chiropractor tomorrow. We've been putting ITR on our back a little bit recently, but just so y'all know, our backs are gonna be fine, and we should be good to go next week. A little sore right now, but nothing we can't handle. But it's it for episode 30. But if you follow ITR Boxing, you follow Catch Connor, you know how we wrap those shows up. So Nibs, I know these fans have been listening for a long time, but give us a little bit on, we touched on it a bit earlier, but why you should support local boxing at the end of the day, especially with all the things that we've seen that can go wrong in boxing.
Look, man, it's you want to support your local fighters for all the reasons we've said in this show before, but even what we've said in this episode, you take guys in your local market that even if they're big or small names, you look at it, Abraham Nova, he needs the support of his community now more than he ever did against Shushu or Shock. I'm sorry, against Rabisi, because this is a loss that's tougher because you won. You won the fight and they took it from you. If a guy gets in there, and we've been talking about prospects this last couple of minutes here. You get a prospect who gets in there, right? Let's say he's 5-0. He gets in there, goes to somebody's hometown, and they split decision him out of there, even though he routed the guy. He needs your support, right? Like we were talking about all those greats, Bernard Hopkins, the Manny Pacquiao's, the Kenny Sims, right, of the world. They needed people's support early on because they took L's when they thought they were going to win to become who they are now, right? Kenny Sims is ascending. Manny Pacquiao, Bernard Hopkins, Hall of Famers, right? These are the guys that most people now model careers after, right? But they needed support. I mean, anybody who knows anything about the Philippines, that's a third world country, But Manny Pacquiao was boxing so his family could eat, not not to have a Bentley or a nice chain around his neck or the things he has now. He was doing it so his family could have enough rice and things like that at the end of the day. So again, support them now so when they get bigger, they look. I'm here to tell you, Floyd always gives back to his community. Andre Ward is always in the Bay giving back to his community. Why? Because they showed up for him when not a lot of people were putting faith in them. They remember it. We talked about Mickey Ward and Arturo Gatti. They never forgot where they've come from. Jack is out there in Brockton. If he becomes a world champion in 10 years, I guarantee you he'll be back at Brockton celebrating with the people that put him on now.
Absolutely. Support your local boxing and support your local podcast, God damn it, too. Throw us a like. We appreciate all you guys. We don't ask for much, but a like would definitely go a long way. Throw likes and subscriptions to Jeff from Bourbon and Boxing's way. Also, he helps us out a lot with these live chats. And we'll have to do something with him and Big Spade at some point, kind of like a code thing, whether we go on there, they come on here. figure something like that out. And he mentioned
Of
quickly
course.
about Isley and Shiraz. I just saw a rumor about Hamza Shiraz fighting Chris Eubank potentially later on this year. I like that fight. We're not going to get into that right now, though. That is it for episode 30. Nibs, as always, it's a pleasure. We will see
My
everybody
guy.
next time.